Buonasera, benvenuti, benvenitos. Cum sta? Welcome. A warm welcome to everyone here today. It's great to see so many of you out here really into heart of not just an immigrant community, one of our most diversely populated and multicultural neighborhoods. And I want to thank, on behalf of the city, so many people. First, the Mirror Coalition for hosting this event in our community, and the Somerville Office of Immigrant Affairs. I know Maria and Meredith are here, and the whole team from Somerville for helping them organize it. Let's give them a round of applause. I also would like to thank, and first let me say, the entire City Council and School Committee for what they do to stand up for human rights, for immigrant rights, to live up of our stated American ideals of being diverse and tolerant and looking at the world and being guided through the lens of equity. And I know many of them will be coming in and out tonight, but I do see some of my colleagues here. I want to recognize from Ward 3 from the City Council, Ben Ewan Campen. Ben, thanks for coming here. From Ward 3 School Committee, Ms. Sarah Phillips, Dr. Phillips, excuse me. And from Ward 7 of the City Council, Councilwoman Katiana Ballantyne. And if I miss anybody else coming in, we'll get them. We'll be hearing today for true champions of equity, of racial and social justice for immigrants, and not just what they say, but everything they do every day. We'll be hearing from our Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley. I'll give her a big round. She should get several rounds. Some of our local champions, our Welcome Project Director, Mr. Ben Echeverria. Regina Prataldo, who's our Student Assignment Officer and Multilingual Service Coordinator for the Somerville Public Schools. Now, I'm going to shortly hand over to Joel Rivera, who's the Director of Organizing for the Mirror Coalition. And he'll introduce our speakers, and I'll be speaking to you a little bit at the end. So big round of applause and thanks to Mira for what they do, advocating for immigrants day in, day out. And please welcome Joel to the mic.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. The weekend is here. Thank you so much, Mayor Curtatone, for the kind words and the kind introduction. I want to thank you, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, as well, for being here. Our wonderful speakers that we're going to hear from later, Ben, Margarita, and Regina as well. I also want to give a special shout out, just like you did, to the Somerville office in Somerville for your continued collaboration and work with us, as well as to the wonderful Latin jazz trio we have providing entertainment for us. Camellia Bands is their name if you want to look them up. They do a great Bésame Mucho. And as well as the ice cream that we have here today for your entertainment. We have lots of popsicles, folks. Please make sure we get our money's worth over there. That's right. Again, everybody, my name is Joel Rivera. I'm the Director of Organizing at the Mirror Coalition, the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a joy to see so many smiling faces here on this beautiful, turns out to be sunny Friday afternoon, to come together to celebrate the immense contributions of immigrants, not only to our economy, but to our society, right here in Somerville, right here in Massachusetts, and in this country. 1 in 6 workers in Massachusetts is an immigrant. There are more than 70,000 undocumented workers in this state that are considered essential workers, filling critical roles in infrastructure. Nationwide, there are more than 200,000 DACA recipients that are also essential workers, working in fields like healthcare, food production, education, and logistics. This is a particularly important moment for us to come together as Congress negotiates yet another recovery package focused on infrastructure. A path to citizenship for essential workers and others will boost economic growth. It will create jobs and create fair wages for all Americans. At MIRA, we continue to call not only for inclusive and equitable recovery, but also for the inclusion of a path to citizenship for Dreamers, DACA recipients, Dreamers, TPS holders, and essential workers in the next recovery package. Congress has an opportunity to act right now through reconciliation, and they must not let this opportunity pass. I would like to now introduce our next speaker, representing the MA7th, our favorite Congresswoman, member of the squad, and someone who I've been happy to vote for in the past. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, you're up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Mira and the Coalition of Somerville, the Somerville Office of Immigrant Affairs, Mayor Curtatone, all of my colleagues in government. Thank you all for continuing to build a community and supporting our immigrant neighbors. You've heard already some important statistics that were enumerated about how many people stand to be impacted if we maintain the status quo of unjust immigration policies. And very often I find, as an advocate for immigrants, that it's tempting to default to an exceptional immigrant narrative, to talk about their scholarship, their intellectual aptitude, to define them within the context of being essential workers. Those things matter and are worthy of recognition. But this is about honoring more than someone's labor, but about honoring and celebrating and affirming the value of their very lives. Yes, there are formidable contributions to our economy and to civic life, but this is about the preservation of families. Mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters. I want to say to asylum seekers, to TPS holders, to DACA recipients, you are already home. I'll never forget spending time with some young people, one of whom is a DACA recipient, growing up like so many in a mixed immigration status household. She's a DACA recipient. Her mother is a TPS holder. Her father is an asylum seeker from El Salvador. And she asked me, why is it that only the DACA recipients are called dreamers? My mother has dreams. My father has dreams. And she asked me, Congresswoman Pressley, while you were fighting in Washington, if they decide they're willing to do something for the so-called dreamers, but not for every other member of my family or my community, I don't want it. 16 years old. This is about one human family and the acknowledgement that our destinies and our freedoms are tied. So it's not enough to offer applause to our essential workers. We need to pay them a living wage. When people say that the government is sending too much relief to families in the form of expanded and extended unemployment, of stimulus checks, what I really call survival checks, they say that's why people don't want to go back to work. No, people don't want to go back to work because they don't want to return to being exploited. But moreover, there are many people who had no choice but to keep going to work so that you and your family could remain safe, who continue to go to work now to patronize places, who make it possible for you to patronize places where you can feed your family and they can't even feed their own. That's unacceptable. And Congress must lead in this moment because the courts have already proven that they are not on our side. So if the courts are not going to step up, then Congress must step up. No matter what a judge in Texas says, we know that approximately 5,600 DACA recipients in Massachusetts and more than 600,000 DACA recipients across the country have protected the health and safety of Americans before and throughout this pandemic. What we organize for, what we fight for, what we demand is not charity and benevolence. This is reciprocity. This is about the preservation of families and economic justice that has been earned and is owed. They deserve a clean and safe pathway to citizenship. And although it seems like different courts every other day are determining that DACA and TPS holders don't belong, we know very well that you do. You are already home. So I stand ready in solidarity as your partner in this fight to demand that we center the humanity and the dignity of all people, and to ensure that Congress provide a permanent pathway to citizenship for all 11 immigrants living in the U.S., which includes DACA recipients and TPS holders. So there's much work that remains to be done. There's much work that remains to be done, and to be an immigrant, to be marginalized, is to be in a perpetual state of activism. But that is not the totality of our being or our identity. Let people see our full humanity, and that means also being joyful and dancing and singing and creating. So joy is a necessary act of resistance, and so today, let us be joyful.
Chair, once again, for a fantastic Congresswoman, our champion in Washington. And listening, and thank you, what you do on behalf of everyone, not just in this district, in this country. Not just speaking the words, but that perpetual activism you mentioned. And that's important. As I reflect upon in my last several months as the elected mayor in this city, the best and most progressive community, I'd submit, in this nation, but it's important that we do more than hang the banners and state the slogans in our position. What's that work really mean? I've been reminded of that, especially without naming names, the last administration held that seat, occupied the White House, and directly attacked and assaulted every value we claim we stand for. And especially after the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, so many others. I find myself in countless moments calling people near and dear to me and apologizing to them and said, I need to do better by you. It's not enough if you stand side by side and we hang a Black Lives Matter banner in City Hall. What's that mean? What's it mean to be an anti-racist, a white ally, to be progressive? What's it mean when you say you believe in Somerville being a community for all, a welcome community, a sanctuary city? What is the work behind it? Don't just stand there to raise the banner and then whisper to someone else and say, well, this is what I really meant. I am a proud son of Italian immigrants and immigrated to Cambridge and were smart enough to run to Somerville many, many years ago. And I grew up in this city. The city is community, like so many in this country, have been a community of hope for people in this country. The saying isn't just a saying, it's true. Immigrants have built this nation. And one thing, again, I learned from 18 years of being mayor is, regardless of whether you've got a friend or foe sitting in the White House, we certainly have friends like our Congresswoman. It is a constant fight and call to do that work, to make sure we live up to our values of being diverse and tolerant and welcoming, and making sure, again, it's not even immigrants, these are our friends.
That's right.
They're our neighbors.
That's right.
God hope they don't call our bluff and leave the country. Our economy will collapse. Boy, we'll be up against it. They work the essential jobs when many of us got to work virtually in those white-collar jobs. They provided the services to sustain us at risk to themselves and their family just to survive and help us survive. Thank you to every immigrant. I am sorry we haven't lived up to those values to you. Your kids go to school with my kids. That's what I'm fighting for. As the Congresswoman has mentioned, we have both DACA and TPS under immediate threat, constantly. And we still haven't seen passage here in Massachusetts of the Safe Communities Act. Or how about driver's license for immigrants? who work those jobs. But let me start by stating what should be the obvious. As the Congresswoman has stated clearly, if you have lived in this country, whether for years or decades or months or weeks, if you have grown up in this country, you've worked and built a life for yourself in this country, then it is your home. Anyone, it is every bit as much as your home as it is my home, because you love this country, this community, this Commonwealth as much as any one of us. And that gets lost. People run away from that. Again, don't just hang up the banners and show up at an event in a political year and say you're pro-immigrant. Really? I've learned something else in 18 years. Never let the lie become the truth. And mark my words, over these next several months, I will speak that truth. You have an important moment here in our nation. The fight continues in the courts, in Beacon Hill, in Washington, and in every city and town. I saw this. I saw this as the former occupier of the White House didn't just undermine the values of this nation, but directly assaulted in a very inhumane, cruel, mean-spirited ways, targeted and villainized immigrants, blamed them for anything that's someone's personal problem in their lives. And when myself and other activists, like Ben and others, municipal leaders, went to colleagues and said, we've got to fight right here in our towns. We need to proclaim and act on who we say we are. And in Massachusetts, one mayor said to me, why is this so important right now to be a safe community? Why is this critical? You know, it just perpetuates the notion that if you're new to this country, just keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, do what we tell you to do, and maybe things will work out. By the way, I got news for all the other families, people like me whose parents or grandparents may have immigrated here. There is no line to stand in. There is no line to stand here. And immigrants want what you and I want: healthy, happy, safe communities. And they're doing more to add to that than those of us who've grown up here. We did also acknowledge that immigrants have held up our nation in a time of crisis. Immigrants worked at all levels of the food industry, as farm workers, as food processors and grocery workers, as cooks and servers. They worked in the healthcare industries as doctors, nurses, as home health aides. They worked in the transportation and custodial industries. And many continue to work even at great peril to their own health. The people who are getting sicker and dying at higher rates than most of us, they were the immigrants in our community who never complained. They didn't have a choice. They tried to survive. So we cannot now turn around and say immigrants don't belong while also calling them essential workers. Immigrants have always been essential. You are essential, not just to our economy or anything that is the hard infrastructure, but to who we are as an American society, as a self-proclaimed decent, compassionate, and humane society. And shame on anybody who pretends otherwise after you've propped up our entire country during a time of national crisis. You are owed. We owe you. You deserve to stay here, in your home, in your neighborhood, in your community, where your kids go to school. You deserve the same opportunities to pursue your dreams like my family had and I have benefited from. You deserve to not live in the shadow of the darkness and the fear that your families will be torn apart. That's what I hope everybody showing up here is fighting to achieve. Not just by showing up, by doing the work. I also want to close with an urgent plea. We all know this nation can be unfair at times. That's being conservative. And it has never been more evident during this pandemic. Immigrants and people of color have suffered a higher percentage of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths because of COVID-19. I have talked to the families of those who have died here in Somerville, and it was almost 90 phone calls, every single call whenever time someone died, or perhaps got evicted from their home, or couldn't provide food to their family, as well as my colleagues. It is, the sadness they feel and communicate is difficult to describe. It is unbearable. It is a terrible loss, and it is hitting this community, our immigrant community, the hardest. Yet we have seen that vaccines do protect ourselves and our community from this deadly disease. We know that. And we need you and everyone in your families in our community and all of our friends to get vaccinated. We need them. We need you to bother everyone you know to make sure they've been vaccinated. And don't accept a single excuse. There are no excuses. This is about the collective good. Vaccines are safe and they're free. They're effective. They work. And you don't need to show ID or proof of residency or have health insurance. We had to fight for months to make them easily available in Somerville when our state government, our governor, abandoned the local healthcare system and infrastructure. So you can get them at your neighborhood pharmacy, at your vaccination site next to Target in Union Square, or at one of the many mobile vaccine clinics. We'll get them to you. And this is one type of unfairness and inequity we can defeat easily. There's no reason for this disease to continue to take our lives in our immigrant community, and shame on us, people like me, if we've been vaccinated, that we're comfortable at being at 70 or 80% vaccination. Everyone deserves equitable access to the vaccine. We need to convince them to take it. Everyone age 12 and up can get vaccinated. Again, I'm vaccinated, my wife, our kids, my mother, all four of my teenage sons again. So please make sure we all do our part, that our friends and neighbors and everyone we know get the same. So again, with great thanks and deep respect to all of you for your contributions to the pandemic, before the pandemic and going forward in the future, and what you've done for our community and our country. And as one elected official, it's been an honor, and I will continue to work hard to serve you with honor and this privilege you bestowed upon me. But I will say this, if you haven't heard it through these words, elections matter. Elections have consequences. In these coming several months, you make sure you elect people who don't just speak the words or show up lately, but who not only don't agree, but explicitly and deliberately attack anyone who would attack you and our values, and who will do the work long term. You make sure you support those candidates and you call them out on it. So we're going to work together. We're going to keep fighting together to ensure that the future includes respect, opportunity, security for our immigrant residents, including, as our great congressman is doing every day, a path to citizenship. What we do locally matters. Thank you very much. Please welcome up someone who does this work day in and day out, unheralded, selflessly in behalf of our community, the director of the Welcome Project, Mr. Ben Echeverria.
How's everyone doing today? In 1869, we placed the last nail on a track linking the East Coast to the West Coast. We celebrated the fact that finally we had an infrastructure designed to bring our country and unite it together. What we didn't talk about was the 20,000 Chinese immigrants that actually built the rail system, who every day had to worry about their lives because people wanted to come and attack them. We don't talk about how in 2011, Georgia passed a bill so inhumane against anybody who would hire an immigrant that they lost $1.4 million in agricultural cost because fruit stayed on the vine, dying and rotting there on the fields. Throughout our history, we have this funny thing where we don't recognize who actually built this nation, who actually moves our economy and makes it work. Instead of celebrating that, what do? Well, 13 years after the last spike was put in, the Congress passed something called the Chinese Exclusion Act, the very first act of immigration, where they literally excluded Chinese laborers because somehow 0.02% of the population was being blamed for stealing all the jobs, taking all the money, and sending it elsewhere. Does that not sound familiar to anybody right now? And that's where we continue to be. We live in a society where, quite honestly, we don't know what's going on. We make up stories because we don't want to put the responsibility of why we're in certain conditions on ourselves. But instead, it's easier to scapegoat somebody else and say it was them. While all of us were busy worrying about what's going on in COVID, those immigrant populations, the people that I represent on a daily basis and work with over and over again, were making sure that you had food on your table. They were making sure that buses were running on time, that buildings were clean, and that everything else was going on that needed to be done was being done. And while people were saying we should shut down Massachusetts for 2 weeks because we couldn't think about the hourly worker who needs a paycheck because 90% of people who live in this state can't afford to live here and we're going paycheck by paycheck, we keep forgetting who are the people that actually need that money. Who are the people who are making this economy move? We forget that too often. Today we continue and we celebrate. And I'll be honest with you, I had a hard time today, and it took me a few days talking with my staff and talking with my board to see if I actually wanted to speak today. And quite honestly, it's because 14 days ago, our numbers compared to 14 days ago, COVID is up 110%. Most of that is the new Delta variant. We still have an eviction problem, which soon, thanks to the mayor, Somerville has extended theirs, but soon we don't know what's going on anymore. We continue to have problems on a daily basis. When my staff and I were hearing these problems and decided we needed to create a fund, hearing people call asking if our fund would cover funeral costs, killed me. When we're hearing on a regular basis that people need money for simple essentials like food, it hurt me. We had to turn around, and because we worried about the immigrant community and those that are working, we started a worker center, teaching people their rights, teaching people what to do, what are they responsible, what is a business responsible for in protecting you, and what are you responsible for. We worked with the businesses to make sure that they were being supplied and whatever they needed. We've been on top of making sure and coordinating with Somerville vaccination sites and continuing to do all the work. We celebrate the immigrant not because it's the cool thing to do. We celebrate them because, quite honestly, they're the ones, while we were home, were making the country move. They were the ones who were making sure the economy was still generating income and that most of us were able to work. We celebrate those people because, quite honestly, they do the work. But instead, what do we hear? They steal jobs, they're lazy, they're everything else that we can think of. But yet over and over again, just like when the bill in 2011 and fruit was dying on a field because nobody wanted to pick that fruit for whatever pay they were getting, then we realize, oh, the immigrants were doing this for us. That's a bad bill, let's get rid of it. There's so much work in Massachusetts we have to do, Safe Communities Act, driver's license bill, and a host of other issues. Here in Somerville, there are things we continue to have to do. I'm still worried about evictions. I'm still worried about making sure that vaccination rates are following, that the people who are being impacted actually have the same rates of vaccination as those that aren't impacted. We need to get the work done. But today we celebrate, and I'm glad that we're here to celebrate. Because quite honestly, if we don't do it today, when will we do it? Thank you, everyone. And I want to introduce the next speaker, Margarita, sorry.
Good afternoon, everybody. Buenas tardes para todos. Mi nombre es Margarita Restrepo y estoy muy orgullosa de estar aquí con todos ustedes. Muchísimas gracias por recibirnos.
Hello, everyone. I am very happy and excited to be here today before all of you. My name is Margarita Restrepo.
Soy limpiadora del Hospital de Évere, en Évere.
I'm an essential cleaner at CHA Everett Hospital.
Soy inmigrante de Colombia
I'm an immigrant from Colombia,
y los inmigrantes llegamos aquí para quedarnos.
and immigrants are here to stay.
También soy miembro de la 32BJ, la Unión de Trabajadores de Massachusetts.
I am also a member of the labor union 32BJ.
Somos trabajadores esenciales,
We are essential workers.
somos para los oficiales de seguridad, trabajadores del aeropuerto, la mayoría de los trabajadores somos inmigrantes.
We represent essential cleaners, security officers, and airport workers, most of us immigrants and people of color.
Me siento muy orgullosa de ser parte del sindicato 32BJ.
I am very proud to be a member of the union SEIU 32BJ.
Hemos sufrido muchísimo, los inmigrantes sufrimos muchísimo y en especial a mí me tocó la pandemia en el hospital y fue muy duro.
The pandemic has been extremely difficult, especially for our immigrant communities, and I myself saw this firsthand working at the hospital.
Vi cómo murieron muchos de nuestros compañeros, vi la soledad, vi morir la gente, nuestros compañeros solos, sin familia, vi sufrir mucho mi gente, dentro y fuera del hospital.
I witnessed a lot of hurt and a lot of suffering during the pandemic. A lot of my colleagues and a lot of people at the hospital who passed due to COVID. It was extremely difficult. It was sad, especially to see our immigrant community and so many people die alone without being with their families.
Muchas familias quedaron solas por causa de la pandemia. Murieron sus parejas y quedaron con sus hijos, o el uno o el otro, el esposo o la esposa. Y fue muy duro, es muy duro. Los inmigrantes son gente muy pobre y muy explotada en este país.
I saw a lot of death, especially amongst families, and families that were then left without their partners, their spouses, that then had to carry on and care for their families alone. Our immigrant community is often taken advantage of, and often a lot of us also suffer from poverty.
Sienten mucho miedo.
And we're afraid.
Esto no está bien para los inmigrantes. Limpiamos y protegemos los edificios más grandes de todo el país.
This is not right. Immigrant workers clean and take care of some of the biggest buildings and a lot of other places across the country.
Except las universidades, una de ellas.
Universities being some of them.
Espacios públicos en Massachusetts.
Public spaces across Massachusetts.
Nos preocupamos por el país porque siempre esté limpio.
We make sure that this country is always clean.
Por los ancianos, por los niños,
We do it for the elderly, we do it for the children,
para construir vidas mejores en este país,
to build better lives for everyone in this country,
para nuestra economía y la de nuestras familias.
for this country's economy and also for our families.
Como tantos inmigrantes que vienen a este país para luchar por sus familias.
Like so many other immigrants that come to this country for a better life for their families.
Soy afortunada. He podido obtener mi ciudadanía, pero no siempre todos obtienen lo mismo.
I am very fortunate that I was able to receive citizenship, but unfortunately that's not the case for many of us.
Siempre fui un ciudadano, solo sé que sienten para luchar, por alimentar a sus familias.
I understand and have lived the experience of struggling to be able to feed and provide for my family.
Pero no siempre fui una ciudadana de acá.
I've always been a resident, but I haven't always been a citizen of this country.
Todos los días me preguntaba si podía estar en este país.
And every day I questioned whether I could be and remain in this country.
A pesar de eso, tenemos muchos inmigrantes que tienen décadas de vivir aquí y no han podido obtener su ciudadanía.
Nonetheless, there are many immigrants who have been here for decades and have not yet been able to obtain their citizenship status.
Por eso le pedimos al Congreso que debe abrir un camino hacia la ciudadanía en conciliación para todos los millones de familias inmigrantes.
And for this reason, we ask Congress to pass a pathway to citizenship for all families across the United States.
Porque muchos han sufrido esta pandemia, han sufrido la crisis de la pandemia y no tienen nada.
Because many people have suffered through this pandemic and don't have anything.
Aquí en Massachusetts Debemos aprobar la ley de movilidad laboral
Here in Massachusetts, we must pass the Work and Family Mobility Act.
y familiar para todos los inmigrantes. Sin estatus legal pueden obtener una licencia de conducir en Massachusetts.
For all families to be able to obtain a driver's license regardless of their immigration status.
Todos merecen llevar a sus hijos al médico o ir a trabajar sin preocuparse de que los detengan. Pasemos esta ley, por favor.
Everyone should be able to drive their children to the hospital or to go to work without worrying that they will be detained. Let's pass this bill into law.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Margarita, for those powerful words. I want to introduce our next speaker, Regina Prataldo from the city of Somerville. From Somerville Public Schools.
Good afternoon, everybody. Boa tarde. Buenas tardes. I am here representing several roles. I am a resident in Somerville. I work for the Somerville Public Schools. I work in collaboration with the city of Somerville. I'm a parent, an immigrant parent who raised a child in Somerville. I'm also a board member. I'm the president of the Brazilian Women's Group Board. So about 29 to 30 years ago, I chose Somerville to be my home because of its diversity. Because just like my city at home, I felt that I could raise a family here. I felt supported. So I raised a daughter who went through the Somerville Public Schools, who now just completed her first year of a PhD program at Texas A&M. Supported by my mother, who left everything to come and be with us so I could work. And I did work as any other immigrant. I cleaned houses, I worked at Burger King, I was pregnant, I waitress in restaurants, and I did other works while at the same time I was an interpreter at Somerville Hospital. When we first opened what is now the Enrollment Center for the Somerville Public Schools, about 26 years ago, called Parent Information Center at that time. We were the first immigrant staffed office in Somerville, and the challenges we faced. The community was so scared of an immigrant-led office. That was challenging. There was a lot of hurt. There was a lot of fear that we were here to take someone else's job. 26 years later, we are here as another programs came as Somerville, as the Immigrant Services Unit, which we speak about, the Brazilian Women's Group, the Brazilian Immigrant Center, the Brazilian Center in Framingham, many, many other programs and organizations. The Welcome Project start coming in the 90s in support of immigrants. During the pandemic, when the support gaps to the underserved populations were exposed, the importance of having representatives of these populations holding leadership positions was also highlighted. I want to talk about the importance of having immigrants, of having minorities represented in the offices and departments in any division, public, private, state, federal. By putting together an immigrant services unit supported by Mayor Joe, the city of Somerville is staffed mostly by city and SPS, Somerville Public School immigrant staff and volunteers. Immigrant business owners received direct assistance support to keep their business alive. Among those, close to 30 businesses were owned by Brazilian immigrants. Applications to rental subsidies, housing, raft, information on the eviction moratorium, food services, school breakfast and lunch, diaper distribution, funeral services information, among us many other assistance and support were provided by immigrant staff speakers of Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, and Nepali in Somerville. It was easier to contact organizations that work with immigrants and other communities like the Brazilian Women's Group because everyone understands the needs due to their own immigrant experience. The same of when we were contacted by outside agencies to help their immigrant populations. The level of services is different. As cultural mediators that we are, one moves things much faster through the system because we understand how it works and we speak the immigrant language. These are valuable and priceless contributions to our communities. As immigrants, we called on each other to provide the services that state and federal governments failed to provide during the pandemic. The Brazilian Women's Group, the Welcome Project, CAS, City of Somerville, among many others, promoted fundraising efforts to support the immigrant communities with cash assistance across the state. At the Brazilian Women's Group, we called upon a group of friends to sponsor families and provide them with additional support, especially the households where everyone was infected with the virus and could not go to work. The access to vaccines to the immigrant and underserved communities didn't happen without a good fight from many groups and individuals because, as we know, equal access is not equal for all. The challenges the immigrant community faced in Massachusetts prior to the pandemic, such as access to driver's license for undocumented immigrants, the DREAM Act that we cannot pass in Massachusetts that would allow undocumented students to access higher ed are still pending, and I urge you here today to support and get involved in the passing of this and other bills that would immensely benefit the immigrant community. As Representative Ayanna Presley said, this is reciprocity. Let's not forget that federally, we need to pass a long-due immigration reform that can continue to be the white elephant sitting in Congress. The immigrant community and its contribution is a vital piece of history in this country that many choose to close their eyes to. To end, I urge you, the ones here today, to get people vaccinated, to get vaccinated, to continue wearing masks, especially in closed and crowded places, given the variants we all watching. Get tested if you have symptoms. A lot is unknown, and the pandemic is not over, but we can overcome this if we stay together and support each other. Thank you.
Can you move it up? I think I'm a little taller than Regina. Not that I'm all that tall. Thank you so much, Regina, to all the wonderful speakers. Can we have another round of applause for all the speakers we had today? Thank you so much. I also want to give a shout out to Rep. Mike Connolly, who just arrived, representing Cambridge and Somerville. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. We're going to go back to the music right after this. I want to give another shout out to Camellia Bands for playing today, to the wonderful ice cream truck that is providing us with some sustenance on this hot day. I also want to give a special shout out to all the Mira staff and Summer Viva staff who helped put this event together and make this happen, to bring all this together. So thank you so much. Special shout out to all the Mira and Summer Viva staff for making this event happen. And again, I want to remind us why we were here today, right? I had a great question from a reporter, like, why not like a protest or a march? I think we do that a lot. We do enough of that. I think we don't do enough celebrating our actual immigrant communities. And so that's what we wanted to do today, celebrate immigrant workers and our contributions to our society, not just to our economy, and to make sure that we include a path to citizenship in the infrastructure package. So thank you again, everybody, for being here today. Hope you have a good one.